Okay, so you want to own a concrete contracting company. A full calendar, trucks lined up at the yard before sunrise, mixers rolling out before the rest of the town has its coffee on, crews pouring footings, slabs, driveways, and foundations all day, with your name on a sign at every site in 3 counties. You picture the office with your name over the door. The crew that's been with you since the beginning. The kid you taught to finish a slab. That's the picture. That's what people mean when they say somebody's doing well. You drive past a crew at work and you think, that guy's making money every single day. The trucks are new. The equipment gets serviced. The phone rings all morning. Looks simple. It is not simple. And the story of how a concrete contractor actually makes money and how they actually go broke is one of the strangest stories in all of business. The money is real. The checks are real. The work is real. The problem is the gap between the day the concrete goes into the ground and the day that money actually shows up in the bank. Because here's the first thing nobody tells you. When they see a busy contractor pulling up to the job site, the person who looks like they're running the whole show is the last one in line to get paid. And the more work they line up, the deeper the hole gets. A hole that has nothing to do with the quality of their concrete. So let's start with the question nobody asks when they see a full calendar. Where does the money go between the day the crew finishes and the day the owner actually gets paid? It sits in somebody else's pocket, and somebody has to pay for the privilege of waiting. The question is who? Keep that question in your head, because the answer is the whole story. Here's how the money actually moves on a construction project. It starts with the owner, the person who wanted the thing built. The owner pays the general contractor, the company that runs the whole project. And the general contractor pays the subcontractors, the crews who do the actual work. Concrete is a subcontractor's game. The concrete contractor pours the footings, the slabs, the foundations, the parking lots, the curb, and gutter. They do the physical work with their own crews, their own trucks, their own forms, their own rebar, their own insurance. They own the yard and the equipment and the relationships that keep the phone ringing. They're the ones standing in the mud at 6 in the morning, checking the rebar ties before the truck shows up. Because if the steel is wrong, the pour is wrong, and the pour is the whole job. And they get paid last, after the owner pays the general contractor, and after the general contractor decides to pass the money along. The people who physically build the thing are the last people in the chain to see the cash. That's not a coincidence. That's the structure of the whole industry, and it's been that way longer than anyone in the business can remember. The deeper you go in the chain, the longer you wait, and the concrete contractor is about as deep as it gets. Now, you might be thinking, fine, that's how every business works. You do the work, you send the invoice, you wait for the check. The difference is the timeline, and the timeline is brutal. According to recent industry data, the average wait from invoice to payment in construction has stretched out to roughly 83 days, and subcontractors, the people at the end of the chain, routinely wait 90 to 120 days. Let that land for a second. You finish a pour in June, you hand in the invoice in June. The check doesn't arrive until September, maybe October. Meanwhile, the crew that poured it got paid every single Friday. Somebody fronted that money. It wasn't the owner. It wasn't the general contractor. It wasn't the bank. So who was it? There's that question again. We'll get to it. But first, it's worth understanding what the contractor is actually dealing with out on the site, because that's where the second layer of the trap lives. Concrete has about 90 minutes of usable life from the moment it leaves the batch plant. You cannot store it. You cannot save it for tomorrow. You cannot pour half of it and come back next week. Once the truck is on site, the clock is running, and that clock is the most unforgiving thing in this entire business. Think about what that means on a real job. The batch plant fills the truck, and the driver has roughly an hour and a half to get it to the site, get it placed, and get it finished. The dispatcher is on the radio, the crew is scrambling, the finishers are working the surface while the load sets underneath them. Every pour is a one-shot deal. There's no second take. And the thing that decides whether those 90 minutes are wasted is weather. And weather answers to nobody. Picture the morning it happens. The forecast said dry. The crew is already on site. The forms are set. The truck is loaded. Then the sky opens. The truck can't pour. The load gets dumped somewhere it won't hurt anything. The crew stands under a tarp, getting paid by the hour to watch water fall on an empty form. Nothing was produced. Everything was spent. Rain on a fresh slab isn't an inconvenience. It's a full crew day. Burned, at full cost. A freezing night can crack a pour that cost thousands in materials and labor, with no way to get any of it back. A carpenter can stop and come back tomorrow. A roofer can wait out the weather. A concrete contractor can't. The product is liquid, it's heavy, it's perishable, and it sets whether you're ready or not. And here's the part that makes the weather even worse. It doesn't just ruin the days it hits, it destroys the days around them. A pour that gets rained out has to be rescheduled, which pushes the next pour, which pushes the next job, which pushes the invoice, which pushes the payment that was already 83 days away. One bad week of spring weather can push a contractor's cash into a completely different season. Here's where it gets interesting, because this is the discovery that turns the whole fantasy upside down. When you do $1 million worth of work in a month, and you wait 83 days for the money to come back, you're carrying roughly $2.75 million of cash, frozen in other people's projects at all times. That's not profit, that's not savings you can spend, that's the price of staying busy. Every new job you win adds to the pile. Every signature on every contract deepens the hole. The busier you get, the more of your money is sitting out there, in somebody else's account, doing nothing for you, and at risk of never coming back at all. Read that again. The full calendar is not a sign of success. The full calendar is a sign of exposure. Go into the office of a busy contractor and you'll see the proof of the problem hanging on the wall. A board covered in job names, every one of them a commitment of cash that hasn't come back yet. The fuller the board, the deeper the freeze, and the contractor who looks the most successful, the one with crews on 5 sites at once, is the one who has fronted the most cash to the most people who haven't paid in yet. But wait, you might say, the money eventually arrives. So the contractor is just waiting. What's the harm in waiting? The harm is that waiting has a cost, and the cost shows up every single Friday. Friday at a contractor's office is a countdown. The envelopes get filled, the checks get signed, the door opens, and the crews come in, and the owner looks at the balance before they sign, hoping the deposit from last week's invoice actually cleared. Because concrete doesn't care about your cash flow. Payroll is due every week. The crew shows up Friday expecting a check, and they don't care that your payment is stuck at day 60 of an 83-day wait. They're not your partners in the financing, they're your employees. And employees get paid. Materials arrive on net 30 terms. The ready-mix supplier doesn't wait for your customer to pay the general contractor. The equipment rental bill arrives monthly. Fuel bills arrive whether the job was profitable or not. The truck payments come due. The insurance premium renews. And all of it has to be paid with cash that isn't in your account yet, because it's sitting in somebody else's, waiting on an invoice that was filed 2 months ago. And there's a detail buried in this business that catches almost every new owner off guard, and it's called retainage. On most commercial jobs, the general contractor holds back 5 to 10% of every single invoice until the whole project is finished. Not until your part of the work is done, until the entire building is done. On a job that runs a year, that means a year of your own money. 5 to 10% of everything you earned, sitting in a box you can't touch, waiting for someone else to finish their part of the job. Do the math on what that actually means. A contractor who does $1 million of work in a year, with 10% held back on every job, has $100,000 of their own money locked away, permanently on every project, forever. It's not a rainy day fund, it's not savings you can spend when a truck breaks down. It's a box you don't get to open until someone else decides the whole building is done. And if the project drags on, or the owner and the general contractor get into a dispute, that box stays shut. Your money, sitting in a box, waiting on an argument that has nothing to do with you. Ask any old contractor about retainage and watch their face change. They'll tell you about the job that finished and the holdback that took 2 years to release, or the one that never came back at all. And for a small contractor, that box is often the entire reserve. The money that would save them in a bad month is the money they're not allowed to touch. And then there's the way the work is priced, because this is where the real gamble lives. Every bid is a bet. When a concrete contractor prices a job, they're guessing. How many labor hours? How much rebar? How many form boards? What's the soil condition under that slab? What's the weather going to do for the next 3 months? The winning bid is often the one with the thinnest assumptions, the one that assumes everything goes smoothly, because the contractor who prices in problems is the contractor who loses the job. So you price the job on the edge, you win it, and then the real world shows up. A soft spot in the ground nobody saw. A week of rain that turns the site to mud, a rebar detail that takes twice as long as the drawing suggested, and every one of those surprises comes straight out of the contractor's own pocket, because the price was set months ago, and you can't go back and ask for more. The truck costs the same whether it's hauling for a driveway or a foundation. The crew's hourly rate is the same. The difference between a profitable job and a disaster is often just a few $1,000s. And one bad estimate can eat the profit from 3 good jobs. In a business where the margins are already thin, single-digit percentages on a good year, one bad job isn't a bad year. One bad job can be the end. So let's add it up. You pay the crew every week, you pay for the materials, you pay for the equipment, the fuel, the insurance. You wait months for the invoice to be paid. When it's finally paid, 5 to 10% of it gets parked in a lockbox until the project is finished. And the price you got for the whole thing was a guess made months ago, on a calendar that didn't know about the weather. The gap between the work you've done and the money you've collected is the whole game. And the game is rigged by the structure, not by bad luck, not by bad management, not by bad concrete. The structure itself is rigged, and it's rigged against the people doing the actual work. That's the part that makes this story worth telling on a finance channel rather than a business advice channel. Because you don't have to imagine what this looks like when it goes wrong. It happens to real companies with real backlogs, real revenue, real contracts on the wall. In May of 2024, a company called Zachary Holdings, one of the biggest contractors in the country, filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. And here's the part that should stop you cold. Zachary wasn't a failing company. It had a wall of signed contracts that looked like a guarantee of years of work. It had projects physically underway, cranes in the air, crews on site, money being spent every single day. One of those projects was a multi-billion-dollar liquefied natural gas terminal on the Texas coast, one of the biggest construction jobs in the country. Picture the scale. A site the size of a small city, cranes visible for miles, thousands of workers, concrete going in by the truckload every day, and underneath all of it, a dispute about money that nobody could settle. The costs exploded. The client and the contractor argued over who would eat the difference. Payments slowed, then they stopped, and a company with more work than it could handle, more signed contracts than it could count, ran out of cash. Chapter 11 doesn't mean the work stops. It means the money gets rearranged, and the people who did the work end up at the back of a very long line. The wall of contracts wasn't money. The backlog wasn't money. The work still to be done, and the cash it still needed to keep moving, was the whole. The company didn't fail because the work was bad. It didn't fail because the concrete was bad. It failed because the money stopped arriving before the work stopped costing. If a company that big, with that much work, can run out of cash, then the problem was never the work. The problem was the gap. Now you might be thinking, sure, but that's a giant company. That's not a normal concrete crew with 3 trucks and a yard. And you'd be right about the scale. But the mechanism is exactly the same, and in some ways it's worse for a small contractor, because a small contractor has one tool for getting paid, and the tool doesn't work when it matters. It's called a mechanic's lien. If a client or a general contractor doesn't pay, the concrete contractor can file a lien against the property, a legal claim that says the property can't be sold or refinanced until the debt is settled. Sounds like protection. Here's the problem. A lien takes months. It takes lawyers. It takes money the contractor doesn't have, on a debt they haven't collected. And if the general contractor goes bankrupt, the lien is worth roughly nothing. Because the property belongs to the owner, not the bankrupt general contractor, and the owner has already paid the general contractor. The person you can actually put a lien on is the one person who's already out of the picture. The contractor's best tool for getting paid is the thing that fails exactly when they need it most. And while the paperwork sits in a stack on the desk, the crew still needs to be paid on Friday. And there's one more trap hiding in plain sight, and it's the one nobody wants to talk about, because it sounds like success. Customer concentration. A contractor's client list is short. It's 1 or 2 general contractors, maybe 1 or 2 developers, maybe 1 big landowner who keeps them busy year after year. And that one relationship is the whole company standing on one leg. When that client pays on time, everything works. The checks roll in, the payroll gets covered, the trucks stay fueled, and the business looks healthy from the outside. When that client stalls, or drags, or pushes the payment out another 60 days, the contractor has no choice but to keep working, because stopping means losing the one relationship that keeps them alive. And when that client fails, the contractor fails with them. Not because of anything they did wrong, but because their entire cash flow was built on one connection they didn't control. The bigger the name on the client list, the bigger the exposure. The most impressive contract in the office is the biggest risk in the office. And that brings us back to the question from the very beginning. Who fronts the money between the day the concrete goes in the ground and the day the money comes back? The crew doesn't. The owner doesn't. The general contractor doesn't. The bank doesn't. It's the contractor. The person with the sign on the truck, the person everyone drives past and assumes is making a fortune. Think about what that actually means. A bank that lends money charges interest, takes collateral, and has lawyers and collection departments. The contractor does the lending with none of it. No interest, no collateral they can actually reach. No collateral they can actually reach. Just a lien that moves slower than the bankruptcy court, and a hope that the check comes. The contractor isn't really selling concrete. The contractor is lending money to every project they touch, interest-free for months with no practical way to force payment on time, and hoping to be repaid. That's the whole mystery of the title in one sentence. Busy contractors go broke, because busy is not the same as paid. And once you see it that way, everything else in this business snaps into focus. So let's build two scenarios, because this is where the mystery finally resolves. Scenario 1: the busy contractor. $1 million of work a month, 83 days between invoice and payment, 10% held back on every job. One big general contractor paying them, mostly on time. For a while it works. The crew gets paid, the trucks stay fueled, the account looks fine. Then, 1 year, that general contractor has a bad year. A project goes sideways. Payments slow down. 60 days becomes 90, 90 becomes 120. The contractor keeps working, because stopping means losing everything, and the crew still needs to be paid, and the next job is already on the calendar. And then one Friday, the money isn't there. The moment it happens, the whole picture changes. The trucks that looked like assets now look like bills. The calendar that looked like success now looks like a list of obligations. He did everything right. He won the work. He kept the crews busy. He built a business that looked exactly like the dream, and he ran out of cash in the gap between the work and the payment. That's the first scenario, and it's the one that fills the bankruptcy filings every year. It's the same shape as the company in the news, just smaller. Scenario 2: the contractor who looks less impressive, the one who says no to jobs, the one with cash in the bank and a calendar that has empty weeks on it. They do less work, but they get paid faster. They carry less risk. They don't have one client holding the keys. And when the bad year comes, they're the ones who can wait it out, because waiting is the only thing that matters in this business. So what do the survivors actually do differently? It's not glamorous. They bill in milestones, not at the end, so the money doesn't sit in a lump waiting for a holdback. They diversify their clients, so no single general contractor holds the keys to their survival. They keep real cash reserves, enough to cover months of payroll, so a slow payment is a headache and not an emergency. And they size their growth to their working capital. They say no to work they can't afford to carry. That last one is the one that makes people in the industry nod their heads. Because the contractor who turns down a job because they can't front the cash for it looks weak from the outside. The crew sits idle for a week. The trucks sit in the yard. Someone else pours that foundation. And from the outside, it looks like they're going backward. From the inside, they're the ones still in business. 10 years later, when the busy contractor down the road has a sign on the office door that says bank owned. That's the real difference between the two contractors. Not skill, not hard work. Everyone in this industry works hard. Everyone in this industry knows concrete. The difference is cash and timing and the ability to survive the gap between the day the work is done and the day the money arrives. The work is real. The revenue is real. The contracts are real. But in this business, revenue and cash move in opposite directions. Every job you win advances more of your own money. Every signature deepens the exposure. So when you see the trucks at sunrise and the sign on the sign, you're not looking at a money machine. You're looking at a person who's been financing other people's projects with their own cash, on other people's timelines, with the weakest claim on the money. The busy ones are the most exposed, and the careful ones are the ones still standing at dawn, waiting for the trucks to roll. The contractor who looks like they're running the whole show is really the quietest lender on the project. The sign on the truck isn't the business, the timing is.